Right now, in cities scattered across 3 different continents, on rail lines the original manufacturer never even intended to serve indefinitely, tens of thousands of trams built by a single Czechoslovak factory are still carrying passengers to work every single day. This is, by total production numbers, the single most mass-produced tram model in the entire history of urban rail transport. More units built than any other design anywhere in the world, before or since. Picture a commuter boarding one of these trams this very morning, somewhere in a city that was, decades ago, part of the Eastern Bloc's shared transportation network. She barely glances at the vehicle itself as she steps aboard, absorbed in her phone, thinking about her workday ahead. She has no reason to know that the boxy, slightly aging electric streetcar carrying her to the office was designed and manufactured by a company that, in any meaningful organizational sense, stopped existing years ago. To her, it's simply the tram. It's simply infrastructure, as unremarkable and invisible as the pavement beneath the rails. And the company that built it barely exists anymore, not as a bankrupt husk limping along on a fraction of its former business, the way we've seen happen elsewhere in this series, but broken apart entirely, sold off in pieces, scattered across dozens of unrelated successor companies, many of which have long since failed themselves. The single most successful, most widely used product this company ever built is still, right now, carrying more daily passengers than nearly any other tram design on Earth. And the massive industrial combine responsible for creating it has, for all practical purposes, ceased to exist as a single entity at all. This is the story of Tatra Praha, one of the largest and most diversified heavy engineering combines in the entire Eastern Bloc, a company that built locomotives, trams, industrial machinery, diesel engines, and military equipment under one enormous roof, and whose collapse, unlike nearly everything else we've covered in this series, wasn't caused by a foreign superpower, a boardroom war, or a factory being physically replaced. It was caused by the very process meant to save it. To understand how this happened, we need to go back to Prague in the final years of the 19th century, to a young engineer who had just returned home from working alongside one of the most famous inventors in American history. In 1896, a Czech engineer named Emil Kolbin founded an electrical engineering company in Prague, bringing with him genuine hard-won expertise gained during several years working in the United States, including time spent at Thomas Edison's own laboratories, at the very center of the emerging global electrical industry. Consider the genuinely remarkable journey this particular career path represented for a young Czech engineer at the end of the 19th century. Traveling from Central Europe to the United States, specifically to work at the absolute frontier of electrical engineering, at a laboratory associated with one of the most famous inventors in the entire world, required a combination of genuine ambition, technical talent, and sheer determination that few of his contemporaries back home could match. Kolbin spent years absorbing practical knowledge about generators, motors, and electrical distribution systems that existed nowhere else in Europe at anywhere near the same level of sophistication. Knowledge that was, at the time, considered genuinely cutting edge even by the standards of the world's most industrially advanced nations. Kolbin returned to Prague with a rare, direct understanding of cutting-edge electrical engineering practices that very few engineers anywhere in Central Europe could claim at the time. And he built his new company specifically around applying that knowledge to industrial and transportation electrification, a field still very much in its infancy across most of the world. Kolbin's company grew steadily through the early 20th century, developing genuine expertise in electric motors, generators, and the kind of heavy electrical equipment that industrializing cities and factories across the Austro-Hungarian Empire increasingly required. This wasn't a company riding on inherited prestige or borrowed foreign licenses. It was built on the direct, personal expertise of a founder who had genuinely worked at the technological frontier of his era, in the country that was, at the time, leading the entire world in practical electrical engineering. In 1927, Kolbin's company merged with 2 other significant Czechoslovak industrial firms, most notably an established locomotive manufacturing operation with roots tracing back to the mid-19th century, to form a single, considerably larger combined entity that took the name Českomoravska Kolbin Danek, generally abbreviated as CKD. This merger brought together genuine expertise across multiple related heavy engineering disciplines, electrical engineering from Kolbin's original operation, and heavy mechanical and locomotive engineering from its merger partners, under one unified corporate structure headquartered in Prague. This kind of consolidation echoes a pattern we've now seen repeated across nearly every company in this series. Tatra's merger of wagon-building tradition with Ledwinka's radical engineering, Škoda's merger of an automotive workshop with a much larger industrial conglomerate, Robotron's deliberate consolidation of dozens of separate electronics enterprises under one combinat structure. Interwar Central Europe's industrial economy seemed to repeatedly favor this particular pattern, smaller specialized firms combining their complementary expertise into larger, more capable combined entities, better positioned to compete against the increasingly large industrial conglomerates emerging across Western Europe and the United States during this same period. By the 1930s, CKD had become one of the most significant industrial conglomerates in interwar Czechoslovakia, a country that, as we've discussed elsewhere in this series regarding both Tatra and Škoda, had developed a genuinely impressive industrial base during this period, rivaling or exceeding many considerably larger European nations in certain specialized heavy engineering fields. Consider just how remarkable Czechoslovakia's overall industrial achievement genuinely was during these interwar decades, a small Central European nation that had only recently emerged from the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, yet managed to develop world-class capability across automobiles, trucks, locomotives, and heavy machinery almost simultaneously, through companies like Tatra, Škoda, and CKD, all operating within the same relatively compact national economy. Very few nations of comparable size, in any era, have managed to develop this kind of concentrated, genuinely competitive heavy engineering capability across so many distinct product categories at the exact same time. CKD's pre-war output included locomotives, industrial machinery, and increasingly sophisticated electrical equipment, exported across Europe and recognized for genuine engineering quality. Then came the war, and then came the same story we've now traced across nearly every single company in this entire series. Czechoslovakia fell first under Nazi occupation, its substantial heavy industrial capacity, including CKD's own significant manufacturing operations, redirected towards supporting the German war effort. After 1945, the country fell firmly within the Soviet sphere of influence, and following the 1948 communist takeover, CKD, like Tatra and Škoda before it in this series, was nationalized and absorbed into Czechoslovakia's newly centrally planned economy. Consider the particular weight this nationalization carried for a company like CKD specifically, given its founder's own remarkable personal history. Emil Kolbin, the engineer whose direct experience at Edison's laboratories had launched this entire industrial lineage half a century earlier, was Jewish and had perished during the Holocaust years before nationalization even occurred, his company having already passed through the trauma of Nazi occupation before the post-war communist government took formal control. The company that emerged under state ownership in the late 1940s was, in a very real sense, already several steps removed from the personal vision and direct leadership of the man who had originally founded it, its identity increasingly shaped by state planners rather than by any continuation of Kolbin's own original entrepreneurial direction. Under state ownership, though, CKD followed a genuinely distinctive path compared to the other companies we've profiled from this same country. Rather than specializing narrowly in one particular product category, the way Tatra focused on trucks and luxury sedans, or Škoda focused on mass-market cars, CKD grew into an almost bewilderingly diversified industrial combine, producing an enormous range of heavy engineering products simultaneously under one unified management structure. This diversification is genuinely worth understanding in some detail, because it explains both CKD's extraordinary scale during the communist era and, as we'll see, the particular vulnerability that diversification eventually created. CKD manufactured diesel and electric locomotives for railway systems across the entire Eastern Bloc. It manufactured heavy industrial machinery, cranes, compressors, and diesel engines used across countless other industries. During the Cold War, it also became a significant manufacturer of military equipment, including armored vehicles, contributing directly to Czechoslovakia's role within the Warsaw Pact's broader military-industrial coordination. Picture the almost overwhelming administrative complexity involved in managing an organization this diversified under one single unified structure. A single CKD board of directors and central planning apparatus was simultaneously responsible for coordinating locomotive production schedules, tram manufacturing quotas, industrial crane orders, diesel engine contracts, and military equipment production. Each of these product lines requiring genuinely different raw materials, different specialized workforces, different export relationships, and different technical standards. Few companies anywhere in the world, in any economic system, have ever attempted to manage such a genuinely broad portfolio of unrelated heavy engineering products under one single corporate roof. And the fact that CKD managed to do so with any real success for decades speaks to a genuinely impressive, if ultimately fragile, organizational achievement. And this diversification also meant CKD's individual factories were scattered across Czechoslovakia in a way that made the entire combine function almost like a small, self-contained industrial nation of its own, with dedicated facilities specializing in each of these very different product categories, all coordinated through Prague's central management, all dependent on the same overarching state planning and resource allocation system that governed every other combinat we've examined across this series. But of everything CKD ever produced, one single product line achieved a level of global scale that genuinely deserves its own dedicated attention. It's trams. Operating under the historic Tatra brand name, a separate use of that name entirely distinct from the truck and luxury car manufacturer we covered in a previous episode, CKD's tram division developed the Tatra T3, an electric streetcar design that would go on to become, by total units produced, the single most mass-produced tram model in the entire history of urban rail transportation anywhere in the world. Picture the sheer scale of what this actually represents. Over 13,000 individual units of this one specific tram model were built and exported, not just across Czechoslovakia's own cities, but across the Soviet Union, throughout the rest of the Eastern Bloc, and even, in smaller numbers, to countries well outside the traditional socialist sphere. This wasn't merely a successful regional product. It was, by any honest measure, one of the most successful pieces of public transportation infrastructure ever designed and mass-produced by any manufacturer, communist or capitalist, anywhere on Earth. To put this scale into genuine perspective, consider that very few vehicle designs of any kind, whether cars, buses, or rail vehicles, ever reach production numbers in the tens of thousands, while remaining in active daily service across so many genuinely distinct national transit systems simultaneously. Cities as far apart as Moscow, Prague, Pyongyang, and various municipalities across Eastern Europe, the Balkans, and Central Asia, all at various points operated fleets of this exact same tram model, each city's transit authority independently deciding that this particular Czechoslovak design represented the best available option for their own urban rail needs. This wasn't achieved through political coercion alone. It reflected genuine engineering merit, a design robust enough, simple enough to maintain, and cheap enough to acquire in bulk, that transit planners across an enormous geographic and political range kept independently arriving at the same conclusion. Consider what this meant for ordinary daily life across dozens of cities simultaneously. In Prague, in Moscow, in countless other Eastern Bloc urban centers, millions upon millions of ordinary commuters climbed aboard one of these distinctive, boxy electric trams every single day, for decades, without necessarily thinking twice about where the vehicle carrying them to work had actually been designed and built. Much like Icarus's buses carried an entire generation of Soviet citizens to their daily destinations, CKD's trams became an almost invisible, deeply embedded piece of everyday urban infrastructure across an enormous swath of the socialist world, a genuinely remarkable achievement in industrial scale and reliability. And this success wasn't limited to trams alone. CKD's locomotives pulled freight and passenger trains across the Eastern Bloc's rail networks for decades. Its industrial machinery equipped factories throughout the socialist world, and its diesel engines powered countless other pieces of heavy equipment across dozens of different applications. The military equipment division deserves particular attention here, since it represents a dimension of CKD's operations genuinely distinct from most of the civilian-focused companies we've profiled elsewhere in this series. Operating within the broader Warsaw Pact defense procurement system, this division produced armored vehicles and related military hardware, according to specifications and production quotas, coordinated at a level well above ordinary civilian industrial planning, closely tied to Soviet military doctrine and the broader alliance's coordinated defense posture against NATO. This gave CKD a genuinely strategic importance within Czechoslovakia's role in the wider socialist alliance system, beyond even its considerable civilian industrial output. But it also meant this particular division's entire commercial existence depended on the continued political and military relevance of the Warsaw Pact itself, a dependency that would prove catastrophically consequential once that alliance system dissolved alongside the broader collapse of Soviet influence across the region. By the peak of its operations under communism, CKD employed a genuinely enormous workforce, tens of thousands of workers spread across dozens of individual factories and production facilities throughout Czechoslovakia, all operating under the same unified combine structure, producing this extraordinarily broad range of heavy engineering products simultaneously. This is precisely the kind of sprawling industrial diversity that made CKD, in one sense, one of the most impressively capable heavy engineering operations anywhere in the Eastern Bloc. But it also created a particular kind of structural fragility that would become devastatingly apparent once market conditions changed. A fragility genuinely distinct from anything we've examined elsewhere in this series. Companies like Icarus or Trabant, however painful their eventual collapse, at least had the relative clarity of a single, well-defined core product and a single, clearly identifiable customer relationship that either survived market exposure or didn't. CKD's combined structure, by contrast, bundled together dozens of genuinely distinct businesses, ranging from trams to military hardware to industrial compressors, each with entirely different competitive dynamics, entirely different customer relationships, and entirely different prospects for surviving genuine market exposure, all tangled together under one single corporate umbrella. Think of the difference this way. Icarus's story was, structurally, a single narrative. One company, one dominant customer, one collapse. CKD's story is more like several completely separate stories from this entire series happening simultaneously, inside the exact same organization. Its Tram division faced a market situation genuinely closer to Icarus's global export success, a product with broad, diversified international demand that could plausibly survive the transition to a market economy. Its military equipment division faced something closer to Robotron's situation, dependent on a specific, politically defined customer base, in this case, the Warsaw Pact's defense procurement system, that was about to disappear entirely. Its heavy machinery divisions faced something closer to Tatra's early struggles, genuine engineering capability, but insufficient capital and modernization to compete against Western rivals. All of these genuinely different situations, each one deserving its own separate strategic response, were trapped inside one single corporate entity, forced to be resolved simultaneously by the same overstretched management team during the exact same chaotic transition period. When reunification and market transition eventually arrived, this wasn't a single company facing a single identifiable crisis. It was dozens of genuinely different businesses, each facing its own separate competitive reality, all trapped inside the same collapsing corporate structure simultaneously. Through the 1970s and into the 1980s, the same fundamental pattern of stagnation we've now documented across nearly every company in this series began to affect CKD's various divisions as well, though with considerable variation across its many different product lines. Its tram and locomotive designs, while genuinely robust and reliable by the standards of their era, gradually fell behind the pace of Western European rail engineering innovation, particularly in areas like passenger comfort, energy efficiency, and the increasingly sophisticated electronic control systems Western manufacturers were beginning to incorporate into their own designs. Its heavy machinery divisions faced similar gradual technological drift relative to Western competitors operating under genuine market pressure to continuously innovate. Unlike the more uniform technological gaps we've documented elsewhere in this series, KKD's diversified structure meant this stagnation played out unevenly across its different business lines. Its Tram division, protected somewhat by the genuine durability and simplicity of its core design, remained genuinely competitive on cost and reliability grounds, even as Western manufacturers pulled ahead on comfort and technology. Its military equipment division, operating within the specific, insulated logic of Warsaw Pact defense procurement rather than genuine open market competition, faced less immediate pressure to modernize in the same way civilian product lines might have, at least until that entire procurement system's underlying political foundation eventually collapsed. This unevenness meant that, even as internal planners and engineers across the Combine grew increasingly aware of the gap opening between Eastern Bloc and Western engineering standards, the specific urgency and shape of that gap differed dramatically depending on which particular corner of CKD's sprawling operation you happened to be examining. Then came 1989 and the Velvet Revolution, and the same fundamental exposure to open market competition that transformed or devastated every other company we've covered in this series arrived at CKD's doorstep as well. But here, the specific mechanism of collapse took a genuinely distinctive shape, one that sets this particular story apart from everything else in this entire series. Rather than a single identifiable external shock, the way Icarus lost its Soviet customer overnight, or a single internal conflict, the way Tatra nearly destroyed itself through boardroom warfare, CKD's collapse unfolded through the sheer chaotic difficulty of privatizing an enormously complex, deeply diversified industrial combine all at once. Czechoslovak, and later Czech, privatization officials faced a genuinely difficult structural problem. How do you sell off, restructure, or modernize a single corporate entity that simultaneously operates a globally successful tram manufacturing division, a struggling heavy machinery operation, an uncertain military equipment business facing a collapsing Warsaw Pact defense market, and a locomotive division with its own entirely separate competitive challenges, all bundled together under one roof? The eventual answer, pursued through the 1990s, involved breaking CKD apart into dozens of separate, independent successor companies. Each division spun off to pursue its own separate path forward, sold to whatever combination of domestic and foreign investors expressed interest in that particular piece of the business. This fragmentation process, unlike the relatively cleaner privatization stories we've examined, with Škoda's decisive partnership with Volkswagen, unfolded over years, marked by genuine financial scandal, allegations of asset stripping by some of the investors who acquired individual pieces of the former Combine, and a general atmosphere of chaotic, poorly coordinated restructuring that Czech business journalists, and eventually Czech public opinion, came to view as a genuinely troubling symbol of privatization gone wrong. Consider the genuinely difficult position Czech privatization officials found themselves in during this period, tasked with somehow finding appropriate buyers, appropriate valuations, and appropriate ongoing strategic direction for dozens of genuinely unrelated businesses simultaneously, all under enormous political and economic pressure to move quickly, since delaying privatization risked allowing the entire Combine's finances to deteriorate even further in the meantime. Some divisions attracted genuine, committed strategic investors interested in building a long-term viable business. Others attracted precisely the kind of opportunistic short-term investors more interested in extracting whatever remaining value existed in a division's physical assets, real estate, or remaining contracts, than in genuinely investing in its long-term future. Distinguishing between these two very different kinds of buyers in the chaotic, rapidly moving privatization environment of the early 1990s proved genuinely difficult. And Czech media coverage from this period documents numerous cases where the wrong kind of buyer ended up controlling a division that might, under different ownership, have had a genuinely viable path forward. Some of CKD's individual successor divisions found genuine, if modest, paths to survival, continuing to operate under new ownership at a considerably smaller scale than their communist-era peak. Others collapsed entirely within just a few years of being spun off, their workforce laid off, their facilities shuttered, their specific piece of CKD's once enormous industrial footprint simply disappearing from the Czech economic landscape. The military equipment division, facing a Warsaw Pact defense market that had, quite literally, ceased to exist, faced particularly severe contraction. The heavy machinery divisions, exposed to genuine Western competition for the first time, struggled considerably, some surviving only in dramatically reduced form. For the tens of thousands of workers who had once been employed across CKD's sprawling network of factories, this fragmented, drawn-out collapse created a genuinely different kind of hardship than the cleaner, if brutal, single-moment collapses we documented with the Trabant or Icarus. Consider what it must have felt like to work at one of CKD's dozens of scattered facilities during this genuinely uncertain decade. A worker at the Tram manufacturing division might watch their specific business unit find a stable, reasonably successful path forward under new ownership, continuing to export trams to grateful transit authorities across multiple countries. Meanwhile, a former colleague who had transferred years earlier to the military equipment division might watch that entire business collapse within a matter of months as Warsaw Pact defense orders simply evaporated. A third colleague at one of the heavy machinery plants might spend years watching ownership change hands repeatedly, each new owner promising modernization and export contracts that never quite materialized, gradually watching their own division shrink through repeated rounds of smaller layoffs rather than experiencing one single clean closure. There was no single shared experience of CKD's collapse the way there was for Trabant's workforce, all watching the exact same factory gate close on the exact same day. There were instead dozens of genuinely different collapse stories, unfolding simultaneously, at different speeds, with different outcomes, all technically originating from what had once been a single, unified employer. Rather than one clear closure date, one clear moment of finality, CKD's workforce experienced a long, uneven, unpredictable process, watching different divisions of what had once been a single, unified employer fail, survive, or transform at wildly different paces and on wildly different timelines throughout the entire decade of the 1990s and beyond. Some workers found their specific division sold to a stable, genuinely committed new owner. Others watched their division change hands repeatedly, each new owner promising a turnaround that never quite materialized, in a pattern genuinely reminiscent of what we documented at Tatra, but playing out simultaneously across dozens of separate business units rather than one single company. And yet, through all of this fragmentation, all of this financial scandal, all of this genuinely chaotic corporate disintegration, those tram cars kept running. The Tatra T3 trams that CKD had built by the thousands throughout the communist era continued serving passengers across dozens of cities, in some cases for decades after the original manufacturing combine that built them had already been broken apart and sold off in pieces. Picture a transit maintenance depot somewhere in one of these cities. Mechanics who have spent entire careers learning the specific quirks and maintenance requirements of this exact tram model, keeping fleets running decades past what most transit planners would consider a reasonable operational lifespan, simply because these vehicles were engineered robustly enough and simply enough to be kept alive through careful, dedicated maintenance long after any realistic prospect of ordering genuine factory replacement parts from the original manufacturer had disappeared. In some cities, entire secondary economies of specialized mechanics, refurbished parts, and locally manufactured replacement components have grown up specifically around keeping these aging fleets operational. An echo of the exact same devoted maintenance culture we described East German Trabant owners developing around their own vehicles decades earlier. Transit authorities across the former Eastern Bloc, and in a handful of cities well beyond it, simply kept operating these genuinely durable, well-engineered vehicles long after their original maker had ceased to exist in any meaningful unified form, performing routine maintenance and occasional refurbishment to keep fleets running that, in some cities, continued carrying passengers well into the 21st century. There's a particular kind of quiet irony worth sitting with here, one genuinely distinctive among everything we've covered across this entire series. Every other company we've profiled, whatever its ultimate fate, at least had its most visible products retired or replaced within a reasonably clear time frame connected to the company's own collapse. CKD's most successful product, by contrast, simply kept working, kept carrying millions of daily passengers for years and in some cases decades after the company that built it had effectively ceased to exist as a coherent organization. Consider how many other examples of genuinely invisible infrastructure operate on exactly this same principle throughout the modern world. Products and systems built by organizations that no longer exist or that have been transformed beyond recognition, quietly continuing to perform their original function because nobody has yet had sufficient reason or sufficient budget to replace them. Bridges, water systems, and countless other pieces of urban infrastructure across the world share this same quiet property, outliving their original builders by decades, sometimes centuries, their continued function depending entirely on maintenance crews who never met the original engineers and have no particular reason to think about the corporate entity, long since dissolved, that first made their work possible. CKD's trams simply make this general pattern unusually visible because so many people ride them every single day in cities where the connection between the vehicle and its now fragmented manufacturer remains, for most passengers, entirely invisible. Passengers boarding one of these trams today, in whichever surviving cities still operate them, are, in a very real sense, riding inside a physical artifact of an industrial combine that technically no longer exists, built by a workforce whose successor companies have, in many cases, long since failed themselves. So here's where this particular story lands, and here's what makes it meaningfully distinct from every other story we've told across this entire series. The Trabant was killed by freedom. Icarus was killed by a distant superpower's collapse. Tatra nearly killed itself through internal conflict. Wartburg's factory ground was claimed by its ideological rival. Zeiss Jena was reunited with its estranged half. Robotron chased a race it could never structurally win. Skoda chose to surrender its independence and thrived because of it. Interflug was defeated twice by the same rival, decades apart. CKD's story is different from all 8 of these. CKD wasn't destroyed by an external shock, an internal war, a rival's takeover, or a deliberate strategic surrender. It was destroyed by its own enormous, unwieldy internal complexity. A company so diversified, so sprawling across so many genuinely unrelated heavy engineering businesses, that the very process meant to modernize and privatize it for a new market economy instead tore it apart into dozens of separate pieces, some of which survived, many of which didn't, none of which ever recombined into anything resembling the unified industrial giant that had once employed tens of thousands of workers under one single roof. And yet, in the single strangest twist across this entire 9-part series so far, the company's most successful product output didn't die along with it. It's still out there, right now, on tram lines across multiple continents, carrying passengers who have absolutely no idea that the massive industrial combine responsible for building the vehicle beneath their feet effectively stopped existing decades ago, broken into pieces by the very transition that was supposed to save it. There's a genuinely unusual lesson embedded in this particular ending, one worth naming directly before we close this story out. Every other company in this series taught us something about how an organization can fail, whether through external shock, internal conflict, deliberate surrender, or fragmentation. CKD's story adds a genuinely distinct coda to that lesson. Sometimes, a company's physical legacy, the actual objects it built and sent out into the world, can genuinely outlive the organization itself by decades, quietly continuing to serve exactly the purpose it was designed for, long after every boardroom, every factory floor, and every corporate structure that originally created it has already ceased to exist in any meaningful form. The trams don't know their maker is gone. They simply keep running, because that's what they were built to do. And nobody has yet found a good enough reason to stop them. 9 industrial giants now, all built somewhere behind the same broad iron curtain, and 9 genuinely different endings, each one a distinct way an entire regional economic order finally met the open market it had spent 40 years insisting it could outlast. And in this particular case, a company whose own physical legacy has quietly outlived the corporate entity that created it by decades and counting. Let us know in the comments which Iron Curtain industrial giant you want us to dig into next, and subscribe because there are plenty more of these stories still waiting to be told.